Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Random Redshirt podcast. I am Zach, one of the hosts, and the other host is Chris. What's up, buddy?
Hello, Zach. Hello, everyone around the world. Awesome to be here again. Zach, as usual, we're gonna have a pretty cool episode today. Like in your background, you've got Starbucks Viper, which is really awesome. Yeah,
Yep.
very nice. And the Defiant. You got the
Yeah.
Defiant and the Viper. So
I
it's
mean,
crossover
you gotta have the Defiant model my buddy built me.
yeah.
It's
Oh,
pretty
that's
neat.
that's cool.
Yeah, it is
Yeah,
like a Star Trek, like a Star Trek BSG mashup or
it's a
something. I don't
mashup.
know. How
Yeah.
cool. I mean, don't you think the Defiant the Defiant would could destroy a Battlestar, right? Or not a Battlestar, a
Spaceship.
base ship, yeah.
Oh yeah, I think
Cylon
that
base
the
ship.
Defiant would like run circles around the base ship
Yeah.
and like, yeah,
And the Cylon Raiders are pretty maneuverable, but I think the Defiance pulse cannons would just tear them to smithereens.
I do. I completely
Yeah.
agree. Totally.
Yeah,
Base ship, no match for the Defiant.
I agree because the Defiant could outmaneuver their missiles or whatever, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, if you couldn't have guessed already, we are here to talk about Battlestar Galactica. We are doing our very first deep dive into a Battlestar Galactica episode. We did talk about the Battlestar Galactica mini series only,
Mhm.
on a previous episode. Be sure to go check that out on down below if you're watching us on YouTube or on the your favorite podcast platform if you're listening to us from there. Also, last week we dove into the Star Trek Deep Space Nine two-part episode, Past Tense, Part One and Two, which was amazing, Chris. It was so cool to talk about a Star Trek episode where they feature dates in the Trek episode when they go back in time that are happening literally right now. I mean, we recorded right in the middle of the dates that Star Trek said the Bell riots were happening in San Francisco. I mean, that's
Yeah.
we have to really, I think, kind of soak that in because that is such a unique moment, and we may not ever have a moment like that the rest of our lives.
Yeah, indeed. That was pretty cool to be able to see and experience and to do it together. Um, and to kind of talk about that episode in general and what the issues were in general. So that was a pretty special moment. That was nice. Very nice
Yeah,
to do.
because there was a lot of things in that episode that run a little bit parallel to our real lives, and by real lives meaning the real world, and
Hmm.
things that were different, obviously, but a lot of stuff that I think we could look at and do some introspective, right, and say, hey, how can we get better as a society? How
Yeah.
can we do better so that we prevent sanctuary districts from happening? I know there's sanctuary cities around the United States, but how do we prevent something really as horrific as what they portrayed in Star Trek of the sanctuary districts from happening moving forward? Because I was talking to my grandmother about this because they mentioned Errol Flynn and she's a huge Errol Flynn fan. It's
Yeah.
like her
Yeah.
guy. And I told her, I said, we were looking and talking about this episode of Star Trek where in Star Trek, it's their past, but this episode really going forward, it's our future, you know?
Yeah. That's pretty neat. Man, that's
It
cool.
is. Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is. It's a little bit surreal for the number of times I've watched Past Tense Part One and Two, and now to be living through the dates in which they said this stuff occurred was really a bit eye opening, a bit surreal. So it was pretty neat.
Mhm. Yeah.
But so if you have not checked that out, be sure to go to our YouTube channel if you're watching us or listening to us, or you can go to your favorite podcast platform to find that episode and take a listen. It's a lengthy one. We went about 2 hours, I think, but it's well worth it because it was a really great discussion that we had.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So over these last like few months, I've been getting in, Battlestar Galactica. I've been getting into it. I'd never watched it before.
Yep.
It's been amazing. I've been able to watch it. The shaky cam hasn't like made me sick or given me motion sickness, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been excellent. After I made it through the miniseries, I kept on with the rest of the series. I feel interesting because at the same time I like, so I know you've watched the entire series, right? So I'm
Yeah.
coming in and I'm sharing with you a little bit like at a time, like when we have our phone conversations and sharing, hey, this episode, this is how I felt, blah blah blah. And it kind of feels weird because I know other people know how it ends, and I have no idea like how it ends. I'm totally experiencing this like for the first time. And there's a lot of like shocks to me. like
Yeah.
throughout the series, that some things I didn't see coming. But overall, I have really enjoyed Battlestar Galactica. I'm on season 4. I still have several more episodes to go until the series finale. Um, but it has been like very interesting. I really feel there's a lot of allegory and metaphor on this series to other things that we have in our lives, and I'm enjoying it very much. So this has been great.
I'm glad because, and we talked about this during the miniseries, that this show holds a special place in my heart with the memories
Uh,
and everything, and it's such a great show. It's such great science fiction,
yeah,
and Ron D. Moore came over uh, from Star Trek, writing on Next Gen and DS9. I don't remember if he wrote on Voyager or not, but he had got his kind of his big break there. I feel like as a writer in Star Trek, and he brought this wonderful approach to storytelling with him, right? Obviously, Battlestar Galactica is different in many
mhm.
ways than Star Trek, and in some ways similar, but the storytelling in this show is so fantastic and it's so good. And like you mentioned, the allegories and the metaphors and everything else, there's so much in this show that if you have not watched it, we hope that our review of the miniseries and a deep dive here and some future deep dives will really whet your appetite a little bit to want to go watch it. I know you
Yeah.
probably noticed this, Chris, when you watch the miniseries of Battlestar Galactica, it probably whet your appetite quite a bit. We're like, man, I got to go watch the whole series now, not just the miniseries.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And when I'd watched the miniseries, I am meaning to do this. I haven't had the opportunity to yet, but I want to go back and watch the original miniseries, from the late 70s, 1978, I believe. Um, because just to get a feel for that, I don't remember. I have to go back and look again. I don't remember if that original had as many uh, kind of resonant themes in it, or if it was more like lighter fare. But this new one, the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, is just filled with a tremendous amount of themes where we can just go into it and you can um, go layer by layer by layer, and there's just so much in the overall arc of it so far that I felt, but also the individual characters.
Yeah.
But yes, I do want to go back and see the original because I've got watching the original on syndication when I was growing up. I've got really great like fond memories of that. So I want to look at it with a different eye, different lens, and say, oh, is there what did they have in the original? That's fun to watch, fun to rewatch there too.
Yeah, and if you're a Star Trek fan, I think you would love Battlestar Galactica
Mm.
because the storytelling is incredible. Now, I'm curious on your opinion on this, Chris, because and we'll obviously get into to our deep dive here in a minute. But do you feel like so next gen the original series and the next generation were somewhat character driven. They I mean obviously they told stories, but they were kind of character driven. DS9 became um more I'm sorry, they're more storytelling driven, right? And then you had DS9 which became more character driven. Like the characters drove the story more than the story drove the characters. Do you think Battlestar Galactica falls into the category of story driven show or a character driven show?
Yeah, thanks for that. This is a great question. Um,
And this will kind of lead into obviously our
yeah,
deep dive here as we
yeah.
jump that.
This is what I think. Um, so I connect it back to the miniseries. I connect it back to Commander Adama's like speech where he says, "Are we worth saving?" It was those lines. Then I feel like each episode, like after that, each season after that, explores the idea of in humanity, like, are we worth saving? So it explores not only the various faults in individual characters and the society, but also the various like heroisms and acts of faith in various individuals and society, and then where it can go wrong and the kind of like very uh almost like crazy ways that can go wrong throughout these episodes. And you see these characters, you see some awful things happen, and
Yeah.
it almost goes, you can relate it. Well, at least this is how I do it. I relate it to Adama saying, "Are we worth saving?" So you relate it to like things where there's characters that want that seek ambition, that want power, that are maybe gluttonous, that are just looking for lust, and you go all through these different faults of mankind. Um, at the same time that they're struggling against the Cylons. And I to me that's the kind of interesting thing. So I think it is an arc that explores, are we worth saving, because it's this general exodus of these people like looking for a new home as a general arc, and then exploring individual traits with their characters. So that's, it's a little bit of a combination one
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, I look at Battlestar Galactica very similar to DS9 in the sense that I think this show is very character driven. I
Mhm.
think the characters drive the stories, vice the stories drive the characters. Um, and so, but yeah, I mean, there is some of that story drivenness to this, right?
Yeah.
But I do think you're right when you talk about this idea that the show explores the many different depravities of humanity, right? And how the depravities affect humankind. And I
Mhm.
believe, Chris, you mentioned this when we were talking about the mini series with Battlestar Galactica, and this idea that you know, like what Adama said, are we are is humanity worth saving? Um, and so I think to me that's maybe the general principle behind everything that they do throughout the series, right? Is humanity worth saving? And all of these different exploration of the dark parts of humanity. You see
Mhm.
some light, obviously, in humanity too throughout the show, but in general, like you mentioned, with this idea of lust and gluttony and these kind, almost kind of like the seven deadly sins,
Mhm.
right? Of what affects the characters. And I think you also mentioned this too, that in Battlestar Galactica, and it's 100% accurate. Characters make choices, and then there's consequences for those choices,
Yeah.
and they have to live with the consequences. And we are going to see some of that in this episode that we're going to talk about in this deep dive. With this idea of consequences, in particular, the consequences that follow Chief Tyrol in
Yeah.
his decisions, and also consequences of another young enlisted man that kind of takes the fall for him too
Yeah.
throughout this. So, yeah, let's jump into this. So we are doing, as you probably saw by the title of the episode, we are doing a deep dive, our first BSG deep dive on the 6th episode of season 1 of Battlestar Galactica, and this is entitled Litmus. So people, you may have heard of this idea of a litmus test, right? And in a litmus test is almost like an eye test, right? The idea of does it pass the eye test? I think that's kind of, if I'm categorizing that correctly, Chris, like a litmus test is something you're seeing if something meets a standard, right? And it passes like an eye test.
Yeah. And the idea of litmus means you can use it for in science, like testing the acidity of things, but also the character of something, like the
Yeah.
litmus, like what is the character, what is the nature of something. So which is what this episode kind of explores, right, on a few different ways, because the character of some of the individuals involved, um you can kind of question, like, oh, well, you know, maybe if something was tweaked a little bit differently, then they may not have had this like disaster that happened on the Galactica.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
true. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think the name of this episode is very befitting. In fact, if you go through it, and since you're now in season 4, Chris, if you go through it back and you go back and you look at the names of the different episodes, the names, they're really well named. They really hit the mark for naming the episode, and the episode details really fitting the mold of that title.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
pretty
think
cool.
I think it really makes sense. So it's been 16 days. If you've watched Battlestar Galactica in the sixth episode of season one, it's been 16 days since the 12 colonies were attacked, right? Since they fell to the Cylons. And you have this ship that lands aboard the Galactica's hangar deck. And the people on board get off, and there's a Marine who is checking the IDs of those passengers. One in particular is cleared and begins to walk through a crowded corridor, which includes the Master at Arms Sergeant is it Hadrian? Hadrian?
Adrian, yeah.
Hadrian, yeah. And this individual joins in the line of a whole bunch of other civilians that have boarded the ship.
And you can kind of tell from the back of the head of the individual that's walking, looks kind of familiar, because in the it was either the previous episodes or in the miniseries where they found out that one of the reporters on the ship Galactica was a Cylon, and they actually imprison him or put him in that armory that's like in the middle of it's like in the middle of a nebula or something, but he looks familiar. You can kind of tell, oh, this is a copy of that other Cylon that was there. So we as the audience know, like, oh, this is something bad.
Well, wait, no, that the guy that was imprisoned on the outpost or the station of the nebula, I think that's a different Cylon. Now, you did mention the guy that you see the back of the head in this episode. He is a reporter. The other guy is the one that they found supposedly left there.
Yeah, Leoben.
Yeah, Leoben. Yeah. This guy, I believe they identify him as someone who they ID'd originally as a Cylon named Doral or Doral. I think is the guy's name. Yeah. But you're right. He was a reporter in the miniseries until they found out he was a Cylon.
Yeah. So something's gonna happen. And that does it does happen, right? So
yeah, because this isn't good, right? He's able to sneak into a place. He's able to sneak on board the hangar deck, right, where the Vipers are. Unfortunately, because a certain Chief Tyrol is meeting up with a Lieutenant Sharon Boomer Valeri in what they call the Sea Causeway. And they're there to continue a romantic relationship that they have been told to cease because he is an enlisted man and she is an officer, and that it violates the rules.
Yeah. So that is happening, and that gives kind of a wedge or an opportunity for the Cylon to infiltrate where he needs to go. I believe that's what happens, and then Colonel Ty gets a little bit of wind of it, right, and kind of is aware and calls for help as Colonel Ty is like following him. But ultimately the suicide bomber is successful. And
unfortunately he has strapped to him devices, right? He exposes the bomb wrapped around him and blows himself up.
Yeah.
Now, this show came out in 2000, but we talked about the miniseries was December 2003, right? And this is 2004. This is around the time of the invasion of Iraq in real life, right? And the beginnings of the attack in the Middle East following 9/11.
I was thinking about the same thing, actually.
Yeah, this would hit home. This would hit home for people who served over there and dealt with suicide bombers.
Yeah. Was thinking about the same thing. And as as we were watching the back of him, like walk through security and walk through those security checkpoints, in my mind, I was watching, I was like, well, how's he just getting through? He's getting through, right? And then because at this point in the series, they knew that he was bad, that this version, that this Cylon was bad. So that's what I was thinking, is like, wow, like he's able to just get through and no one recognizes him. But we find out more about why that is like later in this episode. So that came to my mind.
You know what? You were right. Aaron Doral was left behind at Ragnar. You were right. Yep. I just saw that. I was reading on that. Yeah. You're 100% right of that. So he is the one. So Colonel Ty, and I believe later in the episode, right? Adama thanks Colonel Ty because Colonel
Mhm.
Ty saved Adama's life and he saved the ship
Yeah. Yeah.
just simply by being by being aware, by
Yeah.
being focused and recognizing and then reacting quickly.
I have to tell you, like now that I'm in season 4 and then I'm going back to season 1 and kind of rewatching this, it's a whole different like flavor and color to all of these
Yes.
events, right?
Yep.
And then I don't think I'm spoiling anything. I mean, because
Well, this
everyone,
show's been out
yeah,
for a long time,
yeah,
folks. So if you haven't
yeah,
watched it yet, but you're watching a review of it, then you should go watch it. So
yeah,
you can spoil away, my friend. It's been since 2008 that the show ended. So
yeah, yeah. So Chris here, me, like I'm 20 years late to this. Sorry, everybody, I'm late.
it's okay. I'm usually the one late to the party myself. So it's okay.
Yeah, but it has like this completely different like feel for me because now that I have knowledge on what's happened in season 4, it's like I think about Colonel Ty, I think about Chief Tyrol, because now they've been revealed to be Cylons in the 4th season. I'm thinking, wow, they're going through
Yeah.
this. Like, oh, this is really, really interesting
And they don't know. They don't know yet.
that they don't know yet.
Yep.
And I think about some comments that Baltar's made when he's had conversations with Six, like he's saying, "Yeah, you and I, Cylons humans were the same." So you go back and I'm watching this, I'm like, "Oh, this is like wow."
It's amazing, right? When you've watched a show and you get to a certain point and you have that hindsight to look back and go,
Mhm.
and you're watching an old episode and you're go, oh my gosh, like now that I have the foreknowledge of what's going to happen, it really sheds light and paints a different picture of the things happening early on in the series, which I think is
Yeah.
is pretty standard and common in any show you watch. But in a show like Battlestar, right, where there's always twists and turns at every moment, and you mentioned this earlier where you said that you're constantly being surprised by
Mhm.
what's going to happen. That's one of the things of many that I love about the show is the show does such a great job of keeping you on your toes and keeping you guessing. And I think we mentioned this during the miniseries. It's not, I mean, once in a while, yeah, you can for sure. But in general, it's really difficult to predict anything that's going to happen in the show. Because
Yeah.
every time you think you have it down, you're like, oh, well, I guess I got that wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Let's see. Lieutenant Valeri's character, Sharon, she is in this episode, she's kind of in two places at the same time because she's on Battlestar like as Boomer. Well, actually, and then she's also on Old Caprica as Boomer as well,
Yeah.
trying to manipulate, which she does. She manipulates Hilo back
Yep.
there. So she does a great job. I think she's a great character
Yeah,
throughout this. It's
all
really
these
interesting.
all these actors and actresses who play, especially early on, play Cylon versions of themselves and then versions
Yeah.
of themselves that don't know they're Cylons. Do a really good job. That's got to be a difficult. You're playing both a good guy and a bad guy at the same time, kind of, right? There's like
Yeah.
kind of like split personality almost.
I was, yeah, totally. I was wondering if Chief Tyrell, the actors Chief Tyrell and Colonel Ty, at this point, if they even knew like the arc of their characters. I'm assuming the writers knew the arc, but I don't know
I
at
don't
this
even know
point.
if the writers knew the arc at this point.
Mm.
I don't know that for sure. I mean, obviously, it'd be nice to have Ron D. Moore on with us
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
explain, and maybe when I go to the convention, I can convince him to come on with us. But yeah, this early on, right, 6 episodes in, my guess is they didn't know yet because maybe
Mhm.
as the show's going on and they're writing these characters and they're writing the stories and they're going, oh, what would be really good? Yeah, let's make this person a Cylon. Oh yeah, let's make this person. I honestly, personally, this is my
Yeah.
own opinion,
Yeah.
with no knowledge at all, that the writers probably didn't have in mind who the
Mm.
final 5 or 6 Cylons were.
Mhm.
Right now, this is a big episode, and here's why.
Yeah.
This is a big episode because in this episode, it's the first time that they reveal to the public that Cylons look like humans.
Yeah.
That really completely changes, I think, the tone of the show because now everybody in the fleet is on their toes thinking, well, is this person a Cylon? Am I a Cylon? It almost sows this seed of unrest amongst the fleet, which honestly, at this point, they really kind of needed to tell people so people could keep an eye out for those that they know look like a model, and they could identify certain models of Cylons within the fleet. But I don't know if you noticed that, Chris, but this episode is a major turning point in the Cylon and human relationship because of what they reveal to the general population.
Yeah, it is. I mean, anyone can be a Cylon. You with that knowledge, then there's a great deal of like paranoia that has to happen
Yes,
within
that's what
the
it. Yeah,
fleet, right?
paranoia. Yep.
Yeah. And you know, Adama and the president, they had been keeping it like to themselves and secret. And so they had that conversation with each other, you know, because Adama's like, yeah, this happened. What are we gonna do? And we got to be, I think it's his idea is like, we should be transparent. We should tell everybody. And she's like, yeah, well, they're going to look for, if you make it transparent, the public's going to want someone to blame. They're going to want to pinpoint it on somebody. And this is not going to turn out how you think it's going to turn out. She kind of warns them like, hey, in my experience, you know, public is going to want something and it's not going to be what you think it's going to be. So, which is kind of true at the end, right? What they find out.
Yeah, and one of the things we wanted to do on this episode, besides obviously deep dive the
Mhm.
episode, and I think we talked about this before, Chris, so correct me if I'm wrong. We kind of wanted to do a little bit of a leadership character study on Adama
Yeah.
because here he is, he's in charge. He's going to make a significant decision here in a moment that is going to affect the outcome of this and the course of this episode. But this is to me the first real significant decision, obviously in part with the president, that he makes that I think we should discuss, and that is that decision to make it public that Cylons look like humans. Now, that being said, Chris, do you think, looking back in the first 5 episodes in the miniseries, do you think it was the right decision on the part of the president and Commander Adama and a couple of other people within the senior leadership circle to keep this secretive from the general population in order to, I guess, quell any type of unrest and paranoia and stuff? Or do you think that they should have revealed it early on and then maybe something like this wouldn't have happened?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really, really interesting. You know, you can understand why they wanted to keep it secret because this is 16 days after pretty much the worst disaster that attack that humanity has ever had. So humanity is decimated.
Yeah.
People are fighting to survive. Then if you introduce that the fact that, oh, okay, well, some of the survivors might be maybe Cylon agents, then that makes the situation like even worse. Then the survivors themselves start fighting amongst each other. Then you will deteriorate into complete like it will become anarchy. It will become chaos, right? You won't be able to organize. You won't be able to mount any kind of fight against the Cylons, and you won't be able to organize the fleet into like just trying to get away from the Cylons. So I can completely understand like why they would want to do it, because they were in such a bad like position to begin with. Like if they just couldn't deal with unrest or riots or the chaos that was going to happen with the rest of the fleet, but keeping it to such like a narrow um focus of the people who knew, right? Then it's like, well, if your master at arms on the Galactica, if your head of security on the Galactica did not even know to look for potential Cylon agents of like who you knew, then like I think, I mean, you had 3 people die on the Galactica because of that suicide bombing.
Yeah,
So
and a
I
bunch of people were injured too.
Yeah, a bunch of people are injured. So I think you could look at it like going, well, maybe they should have told, maybe they should have shared that with their most trusted like security kind of personnel. I mean, I get that at this moment, I don't think Baltar had uh, figured out like how to test for Cylons. I don't think that was in place yet. So they had no way of knowing, except they knew it was this guy. They knew it was this face, right? You could at least say, face of this guy, he's a bad guy. Don't let him
Yeah.
on the ship.
Yeah,
So,
all right. Or if you see this man on in the fleet anywhere in the fleet on your ship, alert authorities, right? Like call the
yeah,
Galactica, call not every ship's going to have security people, right? But call the Galactica, and then they can work through that and stuff. But you're right. I mean, so what do you think if you were in Adama's shoes? And for those of you listening or watching, we're going to ask you the same question. If you were in Adama's shoes, what decision would you make? Would you have, along with the president, decided to reveal this right away, right as soon as you found out, or would you keep it secretive until now, or even secretive even longer? I don't know. What say you, Chris?
Yeah, I think for Adama, he should have, in my opinion, uh, at least let his security folks know. So not kept it as secret as they did, until now. Someone with security like should have known, because uh, the Master at Arms. Now that I've rewatched this, I felt kind of bad for her. So her job was security of the ship. Like she was responsible. And Adama's wanting to set up this independent tribunal to say, oh, well, we got to find out who's responsible. Well, that was her job. If she had known to look for like these bad guys, at least she could have shared that with her security team and be able to do something about it. So she's coming into the circumstance really bothered, right? And then when she learns that, oh, there's Cylons are humans, or there's the Cylons look like humans, I can imagine she's got to come in really hot at the same time. Like, why didn't I know? So yeah. So I'm thinking they kept it secret too long. And obviously they kept it secret too long because this tragedy happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me,
Mm-hmm.
and this is, if I was in Adama's shoes, I think what I would do is I would have, told the president, look, like right after everything happens on the ships, they're headed out. As soon as they find out, they say, look, we got to let people know. There is risk to that, though, right? Either way, there's risk. In this case, the risk of keeping it to yourself was people died, and a lot of people got hurt, and potentially you almost destroy the ship, which would have been even more, because if the Battlestar Galactica gets destroyed, the fleet's screwed.
Yeah.
They have no means of protecting themselves. They're done. Humanity's done. The risk of telling them right away when you find out is, okay, you're gonna go through some difficult times. You're gonna go through paranoia. You're gonna go through this big, huge arc of people are scared, they're afraid, they're paranoid, they're accusing others around them of being Cylons, and then eventually that's gonna slowly quell until you are able to actually identify these people. But once you identify people who are Cylon models, now the entire fleet knows what to look for.
Yeah.
So it's this idea of IDing, and this idea of being a ginormous group who has watchful eyes across the fleet, because the Battlestar Galactica crew isn't all over the fleet. They have no way of seeing. They don't have a security detachment that can comb the entire fleet or is around the fleet all the time. So this is your way of kind of adding added security to the fleet, because everybody knows what to look for. Like in this case, this Doral guy, right? They knew quite a while ago that he was bad, right? And by a while ago, I mean, 5 episodes ago or whatever, right? But they knew he was bad, or maybe it was in the miniseries, right? So it would have been in the miniseries. So they've known for a little while, at least, a couple of people that they can identify as Cylons. People would have seen him right away because everybody would know, and maybe he wouldn't have made it as far as he did.
That's
Because
right.
yes, obviously they weren't going to kill Adama in the show, but if this were real life, right? Adama almost dies. They almost lose the commander of the ship, of the military. To me, I would rather take the risk at the beginning with the unrest and the paranoia and the finger point and everything like that, vice dealing with a situation like this, because we chose to keep it so tight-lipped. And you bring up a great point. Keeping it from your head of security was a big foul, in my opinion.
Yeah.
She needed to know. She is the master at arms. In this case, she needed to be aware and alerted so that her and her crew could keep an eye out and knew what to look for. So I think you make a great point there.
Yeah. And I felt at the end when there's an exchange between Adama and the Master of Arms, because he's upset, like when she calls him to the tribunal as a witness, and she's essentially interrogating him. He becomes upset and he says, "Oh, well, you've lost your way," right?
Yeah.
And well, okay, yeah, well, she didn't have the luxury of knowing the way in the first place, like at the beginning, right? Like she had no idea.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
Yeah. So when Sergeant Hadrian meets with Commander Adama and Colonel Ty,
Mhm.
that's where she's informed about the existence of these human Cylons, and it was kept a secret. And that's where Adama puts her in charge of this tribunal. She even says something. She's like, I'm gonna need a free hand, right? I'm gonna need the ability to go about and do this tribunal in a objective way that is detached from outside command influence,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I need to be able to go do this in order to really dig down and figure out what happened and why this was allowed to happen.
Yeah. And he gives it to her. He says that, and you've got it. Like you can
Yeah.
have that. So that's
And,
good.
and and there was another mistake by Adama because he gave her this long leash to go out and do it.
Yeah.
And then when she went out and did it, he didn't like what was happening. And we can talk a little bit in a little
Yeah.
while about that interaction they have when she's put him on the kind of the witness stand, so to speak. But yeah, to me that was a big mistake because I don't think he realized what he was. I don't. Maybe he did, but at the time, maybe he didn't fully realize the consequences of giving her that free hand.
Hmm. Yeah. She says I'm trying to remember what she says like after during this exchange. She says something to him and he says, I'll take it under advisement. I'm looking forward to see what it was. Her idea wasn't so bad either. Seeing if I can see what it was on here, but it'll come to me later later
Yeah,
as
no
we talk
worries.
through it. Um
Yeah, but it's a big deal, and so uh he gives her the first two, right? These two people
yeah,
that have been identified as human Cylon, and then they go forward, right? And
yeah,
so Chief Tyrol has this crew on board, right? You've got specialist Callie Henderson, you've got Sasinus and James Lyman or
yeah.
Jammer, that are in this room trying to create their own basically bathtub gin, so to speak, right?
Oh
Their own
yeah, yeah, yeah.
alcohol, right? And they get caught and they're like, oh crap, we're in trouble. And then he's like, well, no, 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 no. Come back tomorrow with the proper equipment and I'll show you really how to make this stuff, right? So this idea that Chief has a good relationship, and this is important because this is going to set up the foundation moving forward in this episode, but it shows that Chief Tyrol cares about his deck crew, right? Cares about these young enlisted folks that are underneath him and tries to do his best to take care of them. And that plays into the role that they later play in kind of trying to cover for him and
Yeah, it does.
his poor decisions, which also Adama calls him out on later too.
Yeah, totally. Chief's a good, I mean, in overall, like Chief in this first season is really, really good man. Like he's totally trying to, take care of the guys that are under him.
Yeah, I think he's a great supervisor and a great leader. The personal side is like, ooh, I don't know, man. You were told to discontinue this
Yeah.
relationship by Colonel Ty, and you kept doing it anyways. And we'll get to that part in a little while with where Adama calls him out because you're like, oh my, wow, he went right for the jugular on that one. But
Yeah.
yeah. So also, then we get a flashback, Chris, to Caprica, where we know that Hilo or Lieutenant Carl Agathon is still on Caprica after giving up his seat for Dr. Baltar.
Yeah. And he's this they're the Cylons are manipulating Hilo to set him up with the relationship of with Boomer that's on Caprica right now.
Yeah.
So I
A
thought that
different boomer, not the
different
same
Boomer.
one that's on board Galactica.
That's right. So that was like really good. I think at this moment, Hilo believes that Boomer has been captured by the Cylons. So
Yep.
Hilo's kind of choices like, hey, is he gonna go try and um, you know, get off the planet, figure out a way to survive, or is he gonna go try and rescue Boomer? So that's kind of the conflict that is at play right there. There's something that I really like that was said about Hilo, because I really like Hilo as a character. Boomer says oh, oh, they're, Six is saying, oh, he's very attractive and all of that. But Boomer says something. She goes, oh, he's a good man. He always does what he always does the right thing.
Yeah.
Because they don't think he's gonna come back to Boomer, and like she says that he's a good man. He always does the right thing. And Hilo, that's what he does. He always tries to do the right thing. And so I've seen that like on and on and all of these episodes. So I
He's a very
really,
honorable guy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm a big Hilo fan. I think he's great.
that's awesome. Like, you think back to the miniseries, right? He was willing to give up his seat when they found all those survivors on Caprica, because he sees Baltar. He goes, oh, Baltar's, I'm going to give up my seat for Baltar because, he's really important. He's really smart. He can help the fleet. So it kind of shows, like, you're right, his honor that's within Hilo.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because this episode, I believe, Litmus takes place immediately following uh the last episode, which I know is like, oh yeah, obviously. But in the last episode, that was the one where him and Boomer, in quotes, right, are hiding out in that restaurant, and they find that
Yeah.
kind of like that basement. It's almost like a shelter that's been built by somebody that's got like food and survival stuff and everything, radio and everything else, and they're hiding out down there. And then he goes up to cook them breakfast.
Yeah.
They get attacked by like actual Cylon, models, robots, not human-looking ones. And then he gets knocked back and is unconscious, and he wakes up and Boomer's gone. And
Yeah.
then so this is following that incident with the Cylon machines on Caprica, on a decimated Caprica. But it's interesting though, Chris, because in this you see many scenes where they're like in, you know, I'm assuming is either Caprica City or some major city with all these skyscrapers. But yet, if the bombs were dropped, why wouldn't they have dropped a bomb in the major city? Why would all the bombs have fallen out in the middle of nowhere? I guess maybe the Cylons are like, well, they'll all die of radiation eventually anyway, so it doesn't matter whether we blow them up or kill them with radiation. Maybe that's the thought process, but it seems strange that they could just be in the middle of this deserted, massive city and there's no damage to any of the buildings. They look pretty fine to me,
Yeah,
other
it
than the
does.
sky is a different color. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a sidetrack, but anyways. But yeah, Adama then we flash back to Caprica, right? Or not Caprica, but to Galactica. And Adama's now having to report the bombing to President Rosalin and
Yeah.
asking for help to search for the copies of the Cylon in the fleet.
Yeah. Is this where Rosalind is saying, hey, this is this where they talk about the independent tribunal, and she's
Yes, and
giving
she's
him the
concerned
warning?
about that.
Yeah.
She's
So
very concerned about that because she knows after all of her political experience that it doesn't always go well.
yeah, she's sitting there going to look for someone to blame.
Yep.
And she's saying it was your, I think she essentially says it, hey, this was your security team. It was your men involved. They're going to be looking for someone to blame. So yeah.
Yeah. And there was even something I think mentioned there where it's not going to be something as simple as just like a no, there's nobody's really technically at fault, that it was just an accident, that people aren't going to take that verdict, well, that it's going to be a witch hunt, right? It's going to be and in fact, I think
He
Adama
says
even says
those
something about a witch
same
hunt,
words.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That it's gonna that he says that to the sergeant at arms, that it's become a witch hunt, and he didn't want that. But the problem is right here, Rosalind's warning him of that very thing potentially happening.
Yeah. It Adama's, that's kind of like his character, right? Adama's character is he'll Adama does the right things. Like on here, he wants to make it public that the Cylons look like humans. He wants things investigated. He wants a tribunal. Later on in the seasons, he wants to, when there's an election with Baltor and Laura Roslin, Adama does the right thing when he says, no, we can't like manipulate the election.
Right.
He it's kind of his thing. And he takes the consequences after that, right? He's got to deal with the consequences from that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let's go to back to that for a
Yeah.
minute, because we talked about that, and you mentioned that so eloquently when we talked in our mini series about how Battlestar Galactica does such a good job of presenting a situation to a character. The character makes a decision, and then the character now has to deal with the consequences of that decision. We
Yeah.
don't always see that in a show like Star Trek, but in this show, it is heavily prevalent. That this show is very, again, I think very character driven, but there is story driven episodes, but this is a very character driven show, and that it deals with this idea of the human depravity, the human condition, people being presented with a situation, deciding to make a particular decision, and then now having to live with the
Mhm.
consequences of those decisions. We see it every single episode, and here's another example of Adama making a decision to have this independent tribunal, giving the master at arms and his security team this ability to go out and just do what they need to do, and then it's going to come back and backfire on him because of what's asked of him, which we'll get to
Yeah.
obviously. But
Yeah, totally.
so I think you're spot on there.
Yeah. So, uh, they've pretty much identified that Hadrian can have her freedom in doing
Mhm.
this investigation, I guess I should say. And she does a good, I felt like, yeah, she kind of does a good job at the beginning, starting with the hangar deck
Yep.
with Tyrol, asking questions with Tyrol and Hallie, um, and the rest of the hangar crew, say where they were, what were you doing? Where was the chief? Where was Lieutenant Valeri? So she she is, of course, very, very interested in the truth. Probably has like well, she definitely has a conflict of interest, right? Because she was in charge of security on the ship. So she's, because this happened under her watch, she's looking for something. Like,
Yeah.
it's not going to be um an accident no matter what, right? It's going to be a witch hunt. So that,
And you can kind of see that in her line of
yeah.
questioning with the deck people, right? And it's interesting, if this was the first time you were watching this episode, you're going through it and you're like, wow, every person she's asking, their stories are different.
Mhm.
So instantly, right away, you're like, okay, nothing's adding up from any of these people. They're all saying the chief was doing something different. So something's not adding up here. Now we know, because in the teaser part in the beginning of the episode, that where he was. We know where he was
Yeah.
as an audience. But that from the perspective of her, she's like, well, wait a second, but so he's not actually doing this, or wait, he's not here, or she's realizing very quickly, very, very early on in this investigation, that things are just not adding up and something's not right here.
Yeah, she's putting together the puzzle pieces, or seeing that things are not connecting. So she gets, I know I'm skipping around, like, sorry about that, but she gets, as she's interrogating them, and she's got Chief Tyrol there, she's able to get him um in a lot of different uh conflicts, right? So she knows, like, she knows someone's lying.
Yeah.
So she's able to catch him in that lie. And like, after that, he just says, hey, I'm going to exercise my right to be silent.
Yeah.
And so she says, well, if you do that, then the tribunal might look at that as further evidence of your guilt.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
Do you think that she set out to point the finger at somebody, and they were going to be guilty until proven innocent versus innocent until proven guilty?
Yeah, I do. Because when I think about, like, her conflict in this episode, right? She's got a total conflict of interest, since security was her responsibility. So she's going to find someone to blame no
Yeah.
matter what. Whether that was the commander at the end, because when she brings him in for questioning, she goes that direction, right? She starts asking, hey, why did you keep it a secret for so long? And she's got a
Right.
good point,
Yeah.
but her motivation is, like, she's got to kind of alleviate her responsibility as much as she can.
Yep. And
Yeah.
so the next thing we get into is where President Rosalin's holding a press conference on the
Hmm.
Colonial One, and this is where she is announcing that there's an independent tribunal going on to deal with the bombing, which I think is her way politically of trying to quell any sort of unrest by saying, look, we have an independent tribunal going on. We're on it. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Everybody take a breath, relax. Oh yeah, and by the way, Cylons look like humans, and here's photos of two people, Aaron Doral and Leobon. I can never say his name correctly, but
Yeah.
and say, hey, if you see, it's one of these like unsolved mysteries. Hey, if you see any of these people, make sure you alert the authorities, right? But it's this bombshell, and to me, this scene in this part of the episode where Rosalin holds this press conference, finally telling everybody like, hey, yep, this was kept, super close hold for a while, and now we're letting you all know. This is this to me is a turning point in the entire series that changes the course of things, because now all of humanity alive, at least in the fleet, knows that Cylons look like humans, and this
Hmm.
now changes the landscape of them moving forward.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, right. And I think put maybe some doubt into the president a little bit too, because if they go, well, if you've been keeping this this huge thing like a secret, then like what else have you been like keeping a secret, right?
That's
So,
true.
you
Yeah,
know,
especially because we know, uh, as you watch on, Tom Zarek was one of them, where there's a number of people that question the legitimacy of her presidency, right? Like she was 40 something in the order, and like she's a school teacher, should she really be president, and blah 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 blah. And so there's already questioning of her authority as the president of the 12 colonies.
mhm.
This doesn't help the cause.
Yeah, especially there's only 50,000, less than
Yeah.
50,000 people left of humanity. So,
Well, at least in the fleet, right? Because we
yeah,
learned that there are some people still on Caprica and some of the colonies that are trying to survive. But in general, yes,
yeah,
it's basically the rest of humanity left alive, and so this is a big deal. And
yeah.
um and so during the press conference, while this is happening, this is when Sergeant Hadrian goes back to the deck with the two Marines, and she tells Boomer, she sees Lieutenant Valeri and says, "Hey, you and the chief are coming with us for questioning."
Hmm.
And the lieutenant, Alex Quartaro, I think they say Crashdown is his call sign.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he's one of the Raptor guys, right? He's a Raptor
yeah.
guy, I think. And he's like, yeah, not so fast. We're gonna need some explanation. He kind of inserts his officer rank to the sergeant, and is not a fan of this idea of her taking off, taking two senior people with him. And this is when she's like, nope, we're going to do this. This is going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And then she takes the two of them off for questioning. I believe, they're the first two people that sit in the chair in front of the tribunal for questioning, I believe.
Mhm.
Chief Tyrol and Lieutenant Sharon Valeria Boomer.
Yeah, and then Boomer's asked in front of the tribunal judges, like, "Hey, where were you at the time of the bombing? What were you doing? Um, are you engaged in an ongoing relationship with Tyrol?" Right? And so, all with the intent of like, "Hey, are they trying to find like some conspiracy, some people like colluding with the Cylons?"
Yeah.
And things, this is when things really start to fall apart for Boomer and Tyrol because uh, they they're each going to give like conflicting like stories of like where they were and what they were doing. I was asleep in my rack. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, Chris, that in this moment where um, Chief Tyrol and Boomer are being questioned, do you think that her line of questioning, with she's getting really personal with relationship stuff, do you think her questioning is borderline, or if not over the line, inappropriate, given what she's trying to find out, and what does this relationship have to do with, or do you think she's being incredibly thorough?
This is where I think I feel it wasn't appropriate because
It was or wasn't?
was not
It was not. Yeah. Okay.
was not um not for her to ask because I like I said before that Master at Arms she's totally in a conflict of interest circumstance. I think it may be appropriate if you had someone completely independent starting to ask, hey, what's the nature of your relationships with different members of the crew? But because she's looking for someone to blame no matter what, that I feel like, oh, it's it's inappropriate. So, and she goes, I think it's inappropriate with Boomer and Tyrol and with Adama. So that's
Yeah.
just thinking of it. I mean, you could flavor it in the term of, oh yeah, she's just being thorough, but she's got other intents there other than being thorough.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes, I do think there's an argument that can be made for being thorough,
Yeah.
but in general, I fully agree. She this is where her questioning goes across the line into inappropriate, and the reason for that is because relationships like that are not under her purview. That is for supervisors and the senior leadership, which you could argue, yeah, Tyrell did tell them to stop, or not Tyrell, Colonel
Tie.
Ty,
Yeah.
excuse me,
Yeah.
did tell them to stop. They didn't, and this is in my opinion, a leadership fault of Adama. He even mentions he has a soft hand where he should have gotten involved and said enough or else this is the consequence if you're ever caught again, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
because it affects morale, it affects chain of command, those types of things, right? But I do agree. I think her line of questioning in this case, given what she is trying to find out, went past the line of appropriate into inappropriate, because their relationship doesn't necessarily have anything to do with it, although we know it does. But this is where I think she veers off course, and Adama
Yeah.
calls her out on that later. But
Yeah. I agree with that.
yeah, but so the announcement's made, right? And then Callie and Sosinus and Jammer are now arguing as they hear this, as this inquiry is going on, right? And they hear this, and now they're like, well, maybe Chief Tyrrell's a Cylon, and you guys are naive if you don't think he might be, and blah blah. And so that seed of unrest has been sown, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the risk of telling people, which I think had it been done at the beginning and it wasn't kept secret, which then sows a seed of distrust amongst the leadership. This is now having a fallout effect. And this is where I think the risk would have been less telling everybody right away than it would have been waiting. And now people are like, well, if they couldn't tell us something as big as this, what else are they hiding from us, And so that distrust and that unrest and that paranoia now begins to creep into every aspect of life amongst the fleet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no aspect of trust. Kind of their footing is gone, right? What they thought was firm
Yeah.
is not firm, and so they're kind of waiting and swimming and trying to figure out, like, where in the world are they? Yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. And we see the chief come in. He gets grilled, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
by the sergeant at arms. He invokes his 23rd article of colonization rights to stop talking. And he
Yeah.
just shuts down, completely shuts down. And so then we see the questioning now move to Sosinus, and he gives a false testimony initially
Yeah.
on the deck, right on the hangar deck, and now he's being questioned again and decides he's just going to take the fall for the chief, right? He starts saying, "Yep, it was just me. I intentionally left the hatch open on Causeway C. It was all me. I knew what I was doing. Blah 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 blah." And so, I the did you sense this, Chris? That the Master at Arms Hadrian, as he's admitting all of this right in front of the tribunal, her face to me tells me that she doesn't believe him, that what
Agreed.
he's saying in front of the tribunal, she thinks, yeah, I think he's lying. I think he's
Yeah.
lying about actually taking responsibility. Her face to me doesn't say that she believes him.
Yeah, I agree. I thought the same. Like, she thought that he was hiding something still, that he was lying. And she asked him at the end, I think, did you intentionally leave the hatch open? And he's kind of quiet, and he goes, yeah, I did. And
It was too awkward. The
yeah.
testimony from him was way too awkward. And so now the situation for him is he has lied under oath one way or the other.
Hmm.
Either he was covering up, but he didn't have anything to do with it, or he had something to do with it. One or the other. Either he lied about having something to do with it and being the only person, right? It's all him, everything was all him, and he did it intentionally, or he had nothing to do with it and he's just covering up.
Yeah.
One way or the other, he's lied. And now we jump back to Caprica, where Boomer has still not returned. So Hilo starts heading south. And then, like you said, he's an honorable man, right? He wants to do the right thing. He decides
Yeah.
to turn around and head north to go back and try to find Sharon
Yeah.
or Boomer.
Yeah. And I think it's around here that he walks into this area, and um there's some Centurions. He's got to face off against some Centurions, and then
Yep.
he's able, with Boomer's help, I think, be able
Yeah. Boomer
to
shoots one of them in the head, I think.
yeah, yeah, and then he finds Boomer, and Boomer's just like so relieved. And I mean, she's manipulating him, of course, but
Yeah.
she's so relieved, like, hey, found each other, and hey, we got to go, we got to get out of here. So
Right. And
yeah,
the other two Cylons on the roof, which one of them was Doral or
yeah,
Doral, however you say his name, and number six. Uh, they start beating her up and
yeah,
make it look like she's had the crap beat out of her by the Cylons, but she's able to escape. And you're right, she's 100% manipulating him. As they try to get out of there and get away from the Cylons. But then we also see Dr. Baltar back on the battle on the Galactica visiting Starbuck. And I think this is the only time we see Starbuck in this episode, right?
yes, it is,
Is
yeah,
she's recovering from the broken leg she received. And he's kind of flirting with her, and but she's really more interested in talking about the bombing and the theories of what happened. And she poses a question of, well, do you think that possibly the Cylon bomber might have been coming for you because they found out about your secret project, right? Of trying to identify Cylons in the Cylon detector, and they were actually coming for you to kill you and destroy your project. And he's like,
yeah,
"Oh, I didn't think about that." And that, I mean, obviously we know Baltar is very, very what's the word? He's very
self,
scared.
yeah,
He's constantly on edge. He's paranoid all the time, which I guess if you're constantly seeing a Cylon in your mind
yeah,
that no one else can see, and they're constantly in your ear talking to you and telling you what, trying to get you to do things, and it would make you paranoid too, I think.
yeah,
This
yeah,
probably makes it.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I love those interactions with the six that he can only see, and like how she kind of puts ideas in his mind and manipulates him at the same time. Those are excellent, and he does a good job, kind of reacting and responding to what she's doing there. Very, very
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So we get into the kind of the second to last part of the episode where President Rosalin and Adama are having a conversation over the phone about the tribunal, right? And Adama apparently seems to believe uh Sisinus's admission of guilt, basically, that he was collaborating, but he's also suspicious of the chief. And
yeah,
actually brings up the fact that Adama's father, Joseph, was actually a lawyer.
yeah, yeah. That's right. And Adama believes, they can't do anything because Tyrell has he's invoked that um right of silence, right? The 23rd article is, so they can't really do anything against him. Um, but he's still a little bit defensive of the chief, right? Because just because someone has invoked their right to be silent doesn't mean that they're necessarily like guilty either. I
Yeah.
think he expresses that to the president.
And Adama mentions too that, later on, the chief is the most experienced, senior NCO that they've got left, right? And he needs him. I think that this
Yeah.
is a character flaw and a leadership flaw of Adama. People who mean a lot to him or are in very important leadership roles, he tends to look the other way a little too much.
He does look the other way. And
Colonel
this
Ty
is
is a prime example, right? With his drinking
yeah.
and his shenanigans and his unprofessionalism. They're friends. They go back a long ways. They've served together. He's the XO. He's important, and so therefore he kind of lets Colonel Ty slide by with
Mm-hmm,
stuff that maybe an average commander would not in
mm-hmm.
those situations. We might have relieved him of his duties. And this is another example as we look through this episode of Commander Adama's leadership and character, where you're like, yeah, Adama, I don't agree with you on this. I really don't. I think you give a pass too many times to people like Starbuck, like Colonel Ty, like the chief that you probably shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that's interesting. And with the chief, so it's like this with Adama, right? So Adama knows, all right, the chief is the most experienced um, mechanic, most experienced NCO that they have, the most experienced ones and knowledgeable at being able to keep his Vipers flying. So Adama's kind of like, oh, like I need that, right? And with Starbuck, Adama is the best, essentially the best pilot that they have. So Adama's like, oh, I need Starbuck in that as well. So he's in a difficult like circumstance. Adama is, right, because he needs the best people possible to be in their roles and to do their job. Um, but then, yeah, how does he deal with the disciplinary problems that occur? I mean, Chief is having severe. Chief doesn't listen to Ty, like
Yeah.
totally not.
Most people don't listen to Colonel Ty.
Yeah,
That's part of
oh,
the
that's
problem.
true.
He's the XO. They should be, right? But
Yeah,
they really don't. And so you're right on the mark, Chris. And that's a good point. He is having to balance the idea of getting the mission done, but he's only got who he's got, right?
yeah,
And everybody has character flaws, and some of these people have significant character flaws. But yet he recognizes the importance of the role they play in accomplishing their mission.
yeah. And Starbuck, who's yeah, she's the best pilot. He also feels about her like she's his daughter, but she's got these disciplinary problems like left and right, up and down, all over the place, right? And and Saul doesn't like her, and
Yeah,
he
yeah.
knows, and
That's
he
pretty evident
yeah,
even from the miniseries,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, and he knows Saul doesn't like her. And then Saul's got all his problems like too, but he needs Saul because Saul, when Saul is sober, can help
Yeah.
like get
He
things
and he
done.
gets to that point of sober until his wife shows up,
Yeah,
who Adama brings to him, even though Adama knows that his wife brings out the worst in him. But Adama's the one that goes and gets her and brings her to Ty. I just watched that episode a couple days
yeah,
ago as I'm starting my watch through of the show again, and it's just like the cringe factor of Colonel Ty's wife in that episode is just, oh, you're like, oh. Commander Adama in this case made a horrific decision to reinsert his wife into the picture because he
yeah.
was starting to finally kind of put the bottle away and sober up, and then she comes along, and now he's back to being a drunk again.
It was
And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. You're right. I
and
kind
I
of
know
think
that's not part of this episode, but
yeah,
as we're looking at the character of Ty, right, and how Adama interacts with these senior leaders and the importance of that, you look at different examples as to what's affecting that overall.
I look at it as like so Adama's predicament there, um, when Adama brought Ty's wife back. Adama's looking at it go at from the perspective of um, what is the least bad decision I can do right now?
What's the
I've
least
got,
bad?
yeah, I've what the least bad. Nothing is the right. There's not a right one. There's maybe some that are a little bit less wrong, but
Yeah,
I've got to choose the decision and the path that is a little less wrong than the others. Because
yeah,
for Ty's wife, so Adama kind of keeps it to himself, like for a while, right? He realizes that the wife is alive, so then he's gonna do some kind of clandestine kind of research to see, okay, is this all in the up and up? And then he's like, well, all right, if if Ty finds out like she's alive, then that might be bad, right? And Ty's gonna all kinds of bad stuff is gonna happen to Ty. So I think in Adama's case there, yeah, I think he was just choosing the one decision was like, hey, there's no right. This all of these decisions are wrong. I've got to
Yeah.
make like the least wrong one at the moment.
Yeah. It's the lesser of two evils, right?
Yeah,
In this
yeah,
case. And but so the Master at Arms, Hadrian, comes now to Commander Adama's quarters with the
yeah,
Marines, as Adama's been talking to President Rosalin, and they escort him to the tribunal. And this is really where it turns sour, right? Because she starts asking all these questions and everything, and so forth, and Adama's being grilled basically and put under the
yeah,
microscope, and he eventually gets up and says, "Yep, this is over. This is." I think this is where he mentions the line you said about you've lost your way,
yeah,
right? And I do think he's right in this case. You can tell she's very heated by the question. She's lost her objectivity
yeah,
in this investigation, and he puts a stop to it. However, the tribunal's like, yeah, but we're an independent tribunal that's, you know, independent from the military. This has been established by the president. You don't have any authority here. And, something to the effect of like, well, yeah, this tribunal though is happening on my ship. And he's gonna go leave the room, and Hadrian orders the corporal of the guard to stop him and restrain him from further questioning. And he looks at the corporal right in the eyes and says, "You got a choice to make here, son," or something like that, right?
make your choice, son.
Yeah,
I
make a
like
choice,
that a
son.
lot. Yeah,
Yeah, and he looks at him and goes, "Yeah, I'm going to err on the side of my job, right, my
yeah,
career," and decides not to. And so they then take Hadrian under she's not under arrest, but they put her, they restrain her
yeah. To restrained,
and
confined to quarters at
confined
least.
to
Yeah,
quarters. Yep. And so now we get Rosalind holding another press conference saying, "Yep, the tribunal's done. This Socinus guy is but been put in the brig. He lied under oath. He dereliction of duty, everything else, and basically giving us kind of a scapegoat for what happened, right? Without, as we know, the real person being, getting in trouble for this." And this scene next, where Chief Tyrol comes rushing into Adama's office
hmm,
after he hears the
yeah,
announcement from the president. And this is where he reveals his continued illicit relationship with Boomer, and insists that Socinus is lying to protect him, but Adama does not care. And I don't have the quote down, or I would quote it, but this interaction between the chief and Commander Adama to me was my favorite part of the episode, because he's saying, Chief's like, "I should be in the brig," and he's like, "You're right, you should be in the brig." And he's like, "You should be in the brig. You couldn't keep your freaking fly closed, right?
yeah,
Couldn't keep your fly up." And he really lays into the chief. He lays into him and lays into him, and he says, but you're the most experienced, NCO we've got. I need you to keep my planes flying, or whatever it was, right?
yeah. He
Because of
explained. Yeah,
his role in preventing the fleet from being destroyed, because of the protection that the Vipers offer.
yeah, absolutely. So when he was talking about Socinus, because Tyrell says, yeah, he's not guilty. He's innocent. He's not guilty. And Adama challenges him on that. He says, "What do you mean he's not? He either lied about this or he lied about that under oath,
Yeah.
and he's a crewman on my ship, so he's guilty, and
Yeah.
he's gonna pay the price, right?" And I think his Socinus is kind of his penance is I don't think it's that bad. I think it was alleviated a little bit, but he says, yeah, he's guilty and we can't have that, and he's paying the price. And then what he says to Chief Tyrol is like, and your price is knowing that this person covered for you when you were guilty of that, because right, you couldn't keep your
Your fly
fly
zipped. Yeah.
zipped.
And yeah, and he says, and every day you walk out of that hangar, you're
Yeah.
going to carry that with you. So you're going to pay a much different price.
Yeah.
That was a really powerful line
I
because
thought
it's
so. Yeah.
almost like Adama knows that the chief is guilty, but he
Yeah.
also knows he needs him, right? That's that balance. So what he's doing is he's going to make him pay because by knowing that every day he's going to go to that hangar and somebody else is in the brig on his behalf because he couldn't control himself.
Hmm.
And so you look at that from a leadership perspective and you say, okay, what would be more impactful to help the chief learn his lesson? Throwing him in the brig and making him stay there and sit there, or having to do what Adama did? I think what Adama did is more impactful and more powerful.
I
And
agree
so
with
then
that.
and because of that, because of what Commander Adama says, Chief Tyrol now immediately goes to meet up with Boomer again in their usual hangout spot. And he immediately says, nope, can't do this anymore. This has put an innocent man in the brig, and you can see the immediate effect it's had on the chief, right? This young guy who's now his life and his career have been ruined because of covering for the chief and because of the chief's decisions. He's like, this is over, this relationship's over. It's not, this relationship is not worth ending my career and blah blah. And he has this big thing, and he says, hey, did you leave the hatch open to the Causeway C or whatever? And she's, Boomers just couldn't believe that he's asking her this, and she said, something effective like, you're gonna get the answer, the only answer you're ever gonna get, and then she just walks out,
Yeah.
and that's what and the episode ends.
Yeah.
And so the chief now has to deal with an extreme amount of guilt, which I think, to kind of back Adam up in this, I think is more powerful and a bigger way to learn his lesson here, because somebody else's life has been ruined and tarnished and their career tarnished because of decisions he made because he wouldn't step up and say he was guilty.
Yeah. Because of a flaw in his character. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Um, people were severely affected. Yeah, that was
So
a great,
this is
great point.
where Adama's hand, he doesn't have a light touch here. I think it's more of I'm not going, I need him to keep doing his job, but now what he's going to go through is a far bigger punishment than him just sitting in the brig.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
And this
agree.
is where I would agree with what Adama did,
Yeah.
the way in which he approached it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and because I even remember when the chief says something to the effect of like, you can't do this, and Adama goes, I can't, almost
Yeah.
like, really, I'm the commander, I can't do this, really. The chief and and Commander Adama come to blows a little bit, and then Adama just kind of slaps the chief back into place and is like, yeah, no.
And they literally, this is the interesting relationship between the Adama and the chief, because they literally like come to blows in a few seasons later when Adama calls him out to a boxing match, and Adama calls the chief out, and Adama like knocks the chief like down, like hard, because
Yeah.
I think Adama's, it's interesting their relationship because he tries to teach the chief like a lesson. Um, and some of it is internal to Adama too, because Adama's realizing like, yeah, I have a soft touch. All right, maybe I was too soft. He's kind of like, maybe I was too soft, and so he's got to therefore he responds in the way he does, like, oh, now it's time I've got to be hard on Tyrol, and now he's got to see the consequences of all his actions. And then later on in the boxing, in the boxing match, he calls Tyrell out, like, hey, you're fat, you're out of shape, like, I'm gonna,
Well, yeah, because this is post New Caprica, right?
yeah,
So
that's post New Caprica.
yeah,
So that was kind of interesting, like their relationship.
yeah.
I
It's
do,
it's it's a
yeah.
rocky relationship
Oh,
over the
for
course of the
sure.
show.
Yeah. And like, Hadrian, I haven't seen her much throughout those other episodes in the seasons, but now that I look back, like since this is the second time I've seen this, and I think about Hadrian, like, yeah, she lost her way, but she was never objective in the first place, and
Right.
could never have been objective. Like, so I know she wanted to do the tribunal, but Adama like should never have had her like in that position, because
Yes,
you know,
absolutely right. He
like,
should have appointed somebody else.
yeah, somebody
Yep.
else. Because then
Yep.
at the end, she doesn't feel good at the end. nothing, right? So
Yeah, why would she? She was removed from her position
yeah,
basically in the sense of this is she was given the confidence to do the tribunal, to do this investigation, and she couldn't maintain objectivity. She couldn't maintain independency, and that's what
yeah,
hurt it.
yeah,
Yep.
and
Yeah. So I think you're spot on there. I really do. And that was something that by the end of the episode, I go, yeah, she wasn't the right pick for that. And I think we see that a lot with Adama throughout the series,
mhm,
where honestly, you may have a different take on this, Chris, but there are many times throughout the Battlestar Galactica series where I question Adama's judgment of character.
mm,
I think that one of his flaws as a leader is he's a poor judge of character at times. Maybe not
mhm,
always,
mhm,
but at times I think he is. And that then affects people that are either appointed to or allowed to stay in and maintain some type of position of leadership or supervision.
yeah,
Now, granted, the counter argument to that is right is that there's only so many people to go around, right? You don't have that many options, right? So it's
yeah,
like if you want to save humanity and get out of this, you're going to have to figure out a way to overcome people's character flaws to still get
yeah,
the mission done. And
yeah,
that is a huge weight. I mean, you think about it, the amount of stress and weight that's on Adama's shoulders to be the singular military leader of humanity now, not just of a battle star, not of even the fleet, humanity, the military leader and advisor to the president, minus Lee being this kind of like side military advisor to Rosalin. That's a huge, massive weight to take on. In addition to have to constantly deal with all of these bigger than life characters, right? These
mhm,
people who have huge personalities and many, many, many faults and character flaws. And he's got to somehow figure all that out and put it all together to get the heck out of there and try to find Earth. It's a massive undertaking and a position I would not envy.
there's a phrase that he says to uh the president Laura Roslin. This is like either season 3 or season 4, and they're dealing with things, and he says to her, never let them see you sweat. Right? So um because you're right, he's dealing with this tremendous pressure, and he's got to show up
Yeah.
every day and deal with these momentous decisions that are life and death decisions for the rest of humanity, um and then deal with it, and he
Yeah.
does.
That's
Yeah,
true. That's
yeah.
true. If you're watching or listening to us, I'm curious on your thoughts. Let us know either on Instagram or Facebook or on the YouTube channel. Leave us a comment. Let us know, like, what did you think of Commander Adama's leadership in this? Do you think he made the right choices? What are your thoughts? I'm curious as to what those of you listening or watching think from this perspective. If you watched this show before, maybe this is the first time you're watching this episode, or maybe it's the first time you're watching Battlestar Galactica. Either way, that's awesome. But there was a lot to unpack in this episode, I think, Chris, and a lot to break down because a lot was happening around the ship. There was a lot of unrest and distrust and lying and sneaking around and so much going on. And mind you, this is only the sixth episode of season one, plus the miniseries. So things are still real raw and fresh since the attack on the 12 colonies. And people, I think, are just still trying to figure out their daily lives. I'm not making excuses for any of these characters. I'm just saying that everything is so raw and fresh, and they're just trying to make it to the next day and the next day and the next day. And unfortunately, their flaws and the depravity of humanity is coming through full throttle, and their character issues that they have is being shown. And I think this episode highlights very much what you have said previously, which is, and we mentioned this earlier, this idea where characters make decisions and they have consequences and they have to live with it. And the chief is a prime example of that. He continued to disobey after Colonel Ty said to stop your relationship. They continued to do it, and what happened? A Cylon got in and blew himself up, killed people. Somebody took the fall for him. Now they're in the brig, and now he has to live with all of these consequences.
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah, absolutely. Really, really interesting. I was thinking as you were talking about that too, like because this episode goes back and forth between Hilo on Caprica and what's occurring on Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
And I was thinking more about Hilo's character, right? And so Hilo's just uh Hilo's got different choices to make. Like, and he chooses like to help out Boomer, the Cylon version of Boomer. I
Yeah.
know he's being manipulated, but still, like, hey, he's trying to do the right thing. He's gonna go ahead and you know try and help her, try and rescue her, because that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And that phrase that we talk about Adama saying, "Hey, you've lost your way," is interesting, because how do you unpack that? How do you think about that? Like what is the way? What's the right way? Which way should we go? And in all of these, um, when you have all of these aspects of life, like the way, the right path, you've got maybe your touch is too soft, maybe you don't have objectivity, maybe you're involved with like relationships that you shouldn't be in, maybe you've got these overriding like senses of guilt, or maybe you feel like um this like in so Sinus's case, this feeling like of overprotection of someone. You want to protect someone when they're guilty, right? Like being able to see like what is the way, like what is the right way.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack there, in terms of like emotions, um and these kind of false fronts, where seeing the way, you got to kind of step back a little bit, give it some time. um so yeah, I like that you don't always know what the right way is.
Yeah. And okay, sometimes there isn't necessarily a right way, right? Sometimes and in life, right? We make a
Mhm.
decision and we have to live with the decision and the consequences of that, right? And sometimes you're approached with a situation where there's not necessarily a right answer, but maybe one way or the other, there's a more favorable outcome, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right answer, if that makes sense.
No, that
Um,
makes, yeah,
yeah,
totally makes sense, because which one is the little, which decision is the least wrong decision? All of the
yeah,
decisions are wrong. Which one's the least wrong one? So, and that made me, I'm sorry, I'm bringing in a different science fiction like franchise in here, but it made me think about these two characters from The Expanse. I know we both
mm,
we both like saw The Expanse, right? But in the first few books, you've got Captain Holden, James Holden, and you've got Detective Miller. And James
yep,
Holden, James Holden is like, he's got this innocence, and he's very, very idealistic, and always wants to do the right thing. He wants to be fully transparent, sharing. He's trusting people to always make like these right decisions. If they've got all the information, they're going to make the right decision. And then you've got Detective Miller, who is he's a police detective. He's seen like the worst parts of humanity, how people like really act, and he's pragmatic, and uh he's cynical, and he's like thinking, no, you can't give people like all the information. If you give them the information, they're gonna do like horrible things. So protect them from having this information, because they're gonna do like bad actions like anyway. And so Holden goes, hey, I want to make the right decision. And Miller says to Holden, there's no right decision. Every decision is like a bad one. You just try and make the least bad decision that you can at the moment. So right. So
not necessarily wrong either.
this episode like made me think about that like too. Yeah.
Yeah, and the right decision is maybe right in the eye of the beholder, right? Like to
Hmm.
one person, the decision might be the right decision, but to somebody else, it might be the wrong decision. So
Yeah.
there is, in some instances, there's some subjectivity to it.
Yeah.
Not every situation, but in some. Um, Really quickly before we end, I forgot to bring this up, and this is I don't mean to end on a sour note or a sad note, but I did read at the time of this recording, Monday, September 2nd, that our favorite hologram, James Darren from DS9, passed away today, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, so he played Vic Fontaine in D Space
Oh.
Nine. I guess he was 88
Hmm.
and passed away today on Labor Day here in the United States. So, best wishes to his family.
Mhm.
And, it's another one of those. I never met him in person myself. I saw him many times at conventions, would pass by his table and never stopped. And just like Aaron Eisenberg and others. I wish I had.
Mhm.
And so the lesson learned here, guys, if you're watching or listening, you go to conventions or you go to shows and you get an opportunity to meet people, that doesn't mean they're going to be there the next year.
Mhm.
So if you take advantage of it, and it's unfortunate. I always love Vic Fontaine, and that episode between Nog and Vic from the I think it was the towards the end of the episode of the Siege of AR 556 or 8, whatever it is, where Nog gets his leg blown off and he's dealing with
Mhm.
PTSD, right? And he goes to a hologram to seek comfort and mentorship, and he's there. It's a very powerful episode, very powerful episode. And Vic, I think Vic added a lot to DS9 there in the later seasons. So we're gonna miss James for sure. And we just our thoughts and prayers and best wishes are with his family during this time. But yeah, I didn't mean to end on that. I meant to bring that up actually at the beginning. And I forgot. I just saw it maybe an hour before we started recording this, Chris. So yeah, it's sad to
Mhm.
see. It's sad because I just feel like we keep. I mean, we keep losing people, which is always sad. But every time I turn around, I feel like it's somebody who was on DS9 that has
Oh,
passed away.
yeah.
And DS9 is not even the oldest of the Star Trek series. I mean, it's sad, like I said, when we lose anybody. But yeah. So, yep, we'll certainly miss him. And he had a heck of a life and career dating all the way back to Vegas and the Rat Pack and some incredible stories about Frank Sinatra that he would tell and everything. It was amazing. I'm glad I got to see him and speak in person on stage, and never went up and met him personally, but he had some really fantastic stories and a heck of a singer.
Yeah.
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 So,
Wow.
anyways, but I will say, Chris, this was a wonderful start to dive into Battlestar Galactica. I mean, this is only the sixth episode in the series, right?
Yeah.
So there's many more episodes that we could look at. I remember actually Edward James Olmos was on Katie Sackhoff's podcast not that long ago, and he mentioned actually that he thinks the best episode they ever made of Battlestar Galactica was the first one in season one called 33. The one where they're awake and they every
Oh,
33 minutes they have to jump, and he
yeah.
goes into that. So if you haven't listened to or watched Katie Sackhoff's uh podcast, I recommend it. It's really good. She has some incredible people on there. It'd be awesome to have her on here with us one day, but not sure that'll happen anytime soon. But when I go to Chicago, Chris, my goal is to try to get Edward James Olmos on with us.
Wow.
That would be, I mean, any of the cast would be
Yeah.
fantastic, but I would love to have him on and have us sit down and pick his brain and his historic career and his time on Battlestar. And yeah, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try my best. We'll see. But anyway,
Awesome,
so
bro.
yeah, this was awesome. This is a great episode. It was awesome to study Adama's leadership through this difficult process, and to study the characters and to really look at a story that is so character driven, that I think it's wonderful, and I can't wait to hopefully do some more BSG deep dives with you in the future.
Yeah, this is going to be fun to do all of these BSG deep dives.
Yeah,
Like I said, I've been amazed by these episodes and the kind of the different themes that they're exploring. Um, Not only like with overall themes of Exodus and religion, but like individual like character flaws and individual character redemptions.
yeah.
It's nice.
I agree with you 100%. It's been awesome. We hope you've enjoyed this look at the first season episode of Battlestar Galactica entitled Litmus. If you haven't watched the series or you haven't watched it in a long time, I'd highly recommend you go back and do that because it's fantastic. And we look forward to bringing you more of these in the future, along with our Star Trek deep dives and everything else. I know we've got one more DS9 Mirror Universe episode to go before we move on to the Enterprise, Inner Mirror Darkly Part 1 and 2 to kind of finish up the Legacy Mirror Universe episodes, which will be fun. And of course, more stuff to come. Jenny Johnson is going to be back on with at some point. I got to get that scheduled. That's probably not going to be until October-ish. We're gonna have her back on to do something with us, which will be great. And then more guests that we're working behind the scenes to bring to you soon. So we look forward to that. And of course, next year, man, season 3 of Star Trek: Strange New Worlds.
Yeah,
Cannot wait for that. That's gonna be a blast. And hopefully, we'll have director Dan Liu back on with us when we dive deep into his episode he directed in season 3.
fantastic.
Yeah. we're looking forward to it. But anyway, so thank you all so very, very much for watching and listening all over the globe and the interwebs. We very much appreciate it. Be sure to go on Facebook and Instagram. Check us out there. If you're listening to us on the podcast platform, be sure to check out the video version of this and other episodes on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast platform. But we've got about, I think we're around 80 something of our episodes are in video format. The rest are audio only on your, all the major podcast platforms and a few others. So anyways, yes. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Chris. This was a blast, man, as always.
Yeah, this was awesome, man.
Yeah. We look forward to more with you soon. We'll take care and catch you next time right here on the Random Redshirt podcast.